Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs. I'm here with Quayd, and we were just talking a little bit about how, people are divided into different countries. They're each proud of their country or nation or whatever their thing is. It's one more type of division. Because, like, on this podcast, we talk about how, we don't really choose our status in life. Like, you know what I mean? Because we don't choose where we're born in the first place. We don't choose when we're born. We don't choose who our parents are and what genetics we get or what we're taught all the time growing up to the present moment. And so we already understand that nobody can take credit or blame for being better or worse than someone else.
We don't choose our next thought. I mean, our next thought, that's one of the things I like about what Sam Harris says. Like, if you really sit down and think about it, your next arising thought comes from nothing. Like, you don't choose to think the next thought that you have. You have the next thought.
Well, exactly, because how could you think a thought before you think it?
Right, right. But thought necessarily goes into decision making.
Well, exactly, Quaid, and it's like nobody knows that at 9:45 on a certain day they're going to be thinking about a certain thing. Like, how could they know that? You can't
Yeah.
even know what your thoughts will be, and you certainly don't control your thoughts. Otherwise, why would people choose to have thoughts that make them sad?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but you have to make decisions based off those thoughts. Like you have to. That the thought translates directly into decision. Just sorry, I didn't mean to deviate too much because we're talking about Fourth of July is coming up, and everybody wants to get all patriotic and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, see, here's the thing is that nationalism or patriotism or whatever you want to call it's something that happens around this time of year because today is like July 2nd and 4th of July is like a national holiday, Independence Day, when America think they became independent of England.
yeah, yeah. And like I was saying, I because you were saying that you didn't get into this festivity. I do. I like going to watch the fireworks, though I don't identify with the nationalism, the mindset. And it's funny because I remember learning in undergrad about um, what's his name? He's named after like the first locomotive ever. It's something Bull, John Bull. Yeah, and that guy's basically Uncle Sam, except for Englanders, like back in the day. And it was just this thing to like rally people up so you could get them to do what you wanted. And it's the same thing with nationalism. Like you make things like flags, like patriotic flags or whatever. And I do want to say like I think that we're obviously a morally progressive country in a lot of ways, even though we aren't in others. So I'm not trying to completely disrespect America, but with that said, the the idea is completely ridiculous. Like I said before, like cutting out a plot of land and identifying with that plot of land is absolute idiocy. And um, putting up symbols so that people can step behind them and just kind of like blindly follow them is not critical. It's not intelligent. That's like the definition of ignorance because you're ignoring all the other people in the world. And I want eventually nations to dissolve. I want that, and a lot of Americans wouldn't admit to that because they would see it as unpatriotic. Like people would be, they would want to fight me right now if they were around me and I said that. I don't really care because it's completely stupid. The end goal is for the betterment of humanity, not just one group of people, which you do the second you carve out a plot of land and say, I have to stand behind this land no matter what. It's a piece of land. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree, Quaid. See, that's the idea. It's a short-sighted view wherein you look on the people on your particular land, your particular area that you're in, and you place greater importance on those people and that land and all that stuff, and like the rest of the world doesn't matter as much or something.
Yeah, yeah, I know, and it's a perfect way for us to separate each other. And like really, like I really think that the reason that we can't solve this problem is pure logistics. Because I mean, in reality, I could identify with somebody from. I mean, I do. It's the truth on this show. I identify more with the other co-hosts on here who are from Canada or England than I do with other Americans. And if it were up to me, I would prefer to build a nation with these type of people in the way they think, with scientists, of all these things, they they go past borders. But there's a large percentage of the population in any nation that wants to keep those up, uh, and isn't willing to identify with people in a different country, despite the fact that they might actually think more like the people that are there than their own neighbor.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting thought because, like, let's just say that two countries are at war. Let's say that your country is in a war with some other country. Like for example, of course, clearly how you feel about it may depend upon the reason for why the war is happening, for example. But there are some people who, because they would just want their country to win the war, and just because it's their country,
Uh-huh.
they wouldn't care about the other people in the other country that are being killed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's exactly what war is. I mean, I understand war right now. Like, I'm a pragmatic person, so like for instance, I really do. I will say I appreciate the U.S. I really do. I appreciate the U.S. I think it's morally progressive in a lot of ways. It's obviously not in others, but ideally, I don't want this thing to sustain itself. This is not America is not the end goal, nor should it be. It should be about like ideally. I forget who. Oh, it was it might have been Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens. I can't remember who. No, I think it was Sam Harris. Yeah, who said like, if you take a nation like America and you look at a situation like North Korea, like we have the potential if we could get it together to solve that problem. What you have there is a humanitarian crisis. You have a huge hostage situation, basically. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying I don't want something like that to have its own nation. I want that to go away. I understand that it's difficult to make something like North Korea go away. But my point is that America could be a catalyst or kind of a starting point to solve some of these other humanitarian issues. But it should not be the end goal, and it shouldn't be how we identify ourselves. Um, and we haven't even gotten there yet. But this is going to scare a lot of like religious people. But when you start talking about like new world orders or one world governments, like why don't people want that? Why don't people want a world in which we identify as humans and we bond over that commonality, no matter what? No matter what your religion is, no matter what your sexual preferences or race, like the fundamental issue between any nation is the fact that you can't identify with those other groups of humans. That's it, right? Like any conflict whatsoever, you cannot. If you could get past that other person's proclivities, as long as they weren't hurting you, you would you would have no reason to quarrel with them whatsoever. But when you call yourself an American and you build up that wall, um, basically what you're saying is I don't want to identify with them, and you refuse to. Again, I don't think it's. I call myself American still because I'm a citizen here, But there's a practicality to it, and it's not supposed to, like anything in the world, it's not supposed to be the end goal, and it shouldn't be. It would be a really stupid end goal.
Yeah, it's interesting, Quade, because see, that's just it. It's like, sure, I'm an American because I was born here. That's all. That's all it means. Whereas, like for example, there may still be labels. I mean, I hate labels anyway. But they're necessary to a certain extent. Um, we still identify people as being tall or short or black or white or American or British or whatever, but these are labels that just describe where we're born or how we look or something. But we don't need to take it to a level where it's such a part of our identity that we feel threatened when somebody else is not that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I know, and that's exactly the point, and that's what's happening with America and the fourth. I mean, again, we can talk like the Constitution. I'm unabashed to say that there are other nations out there who don't have something as great as the Constitution. It's just the truth. It's not that the Constitution doesn't have flaws or any of that stuff, but when you look at a nation like Saudi Arabia or uh, there's African countries, there's Middle Eastern countries. I mean, we shouldn't be afraid to say that these there are governmental systems in place there that are not as good as the American one. But even past that, like once you have all, so I acknowledge that this part, I acknowledge that this part of the Constitution or the way that we set up the government here in this way is better than the way they set up the government this way. But it doesn't mean that we should separate ourselves from them, and it certainly doesn't mean that should be our stopping point. Like, oh, we're so great, so we're done. Like it really, like you have to make it about progress and really trying to include people, and once you care about including people, you have to break down those barriers. It kind of seems like, but how do you do that though without becoming an imperialist is might be another, or a is that the right word, imperialist?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Becoming a someone who wants to take over other lands, basically, you know
Huh.
like, yeah, because like again, if you look at a place like North Korea, like that's a bad situation. That's a hostage situation. And as far as a nation goes, we don't kidnap our people. We don't, right? Like they can leave. And in North Korea, you can't do that. That is worse. And so I identify with America on that issue. Um, but it's not because it's American that makes it great. It's because of the idea itself. And I wouldn't give a shit if it was Canadian. If it was Canadian, I would be like, that's an awesome idea, and we shouldn't care that it's a Canadian idea. We should be taking it. Or, I mean, it makes it difficult actually in a lot of ways because, like, um, you look at Northern European education systems, like, they are clearly superior to ours in a lot of ways. But we're having a tough time implementing the things that they've done there. And I think it might have something to do with the fact that we've drawn a line around ourselves, and like we can't do what they do. Like it's ridiculous. It makes it hard to share ideas. Like really, we should, maybe we have to call ourselves America just because like they call themselves one thing, and so we have to identify in a way that's not them. But really, our goal should be to dissolve that concept into just humans.
Yeah, like here's the deal. If, for example, let's just say that some other country happens to have a better education system than you have in your country. It's not like you discount it because, oh, that other country does this, so we shouldn't do that because we want to be distinct from them, even if that means being worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and that's essentially we do that in a lot of ways. And I don't know, maybe we should get rid of the idea of nations like right now because we need like things like global warming. Like we are in this together. Like there's asteroid bombardment, there's a million things that could happen to humanity as a whole that would just be a disaster for everyone. And we need to troubleshoot these issues, but that's hard to do when there's not a lot of collaboration going on. Um, I don't know how you would do that. I don't know how you would just get rid of all the nations. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, I guess at the end of the day, like the idea of Fourth of July is like I said, I go and I watch the fireworks, but I'm basically, I'm a dumb monkey. I just want to sit in a tree and watch stuff explode. Um, and I love the Constitution. I love a lot of the founding fathers, but that's as far as it goes. I love a lot of other ideas from other nations as well. And so I think that you can identify with America and still be a good moral person, but I think that at some point, if you identify too strongly with the issue, it's immoral and wrong and idiotic.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, we could all just be citizens of Earth,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we're all in this together. Because, for one thing, since everything that just about anyone does affects everyone else, people
Yeah.
may not be open, they may not be aware of it, but when you become aware of cause and effect and you see how some things cause other things to happen, you realize that what one country is doing can actually be helping or harming people in some country across the globe.
Hmm.
And you see, since we all share the same planet, it's sort of like we're a big family that all has to share one bathroom. And so if
Yeah.
somebody doesn't flush the toilet and leaves their shit in there, then
It
the next
affects all
person
the
has to
others.
see it, and they have to, you know what I mean? That's what this world is like.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Me and my friend are talking about how on my other podcast, um, we basically decided to start with a fictional city and ask like how would we construct this thing. But there's a concept, I can't remember who it's by. It was in Sam Harris's The Moral Landscape. He said if you wanted to, there was an idea to construct a better society. If you wanted to construct a better society, you would construct it without knowing who you would be in that society. So you could be any race, you could be you could be any gender, you could be any, you could have any philosophy, but you construct it before you know who you're going to be in it. And I think that's a really good way. That's a good way to think about the argument of free will, in terms of like that really is the way it is. Like who we are as people, it's you might as well set up a society before you know who you're going to be, because you don't know who you're going to be by the time you get there. I didn't know that I was going to be an atheist or any of these things when I was just 6 years ago. These things, they just happened. They really did just happen. um, and it's a good way to start thinking about yourself differently, and to start breaking down the barriers between you and other people. And nationalism and patriotism is a it is inimical to that. It is harmful to that concept.
Yeah, basically, because yeah, you don't know where you're gonna be in even a few years from now, and you certainly couldn't have known before you were born what your place in society would be now.
Yeah.
So that's just it, is that you want to make sure that even the most disadvantaged person, they may not be as smart, or they may be disabled in some way or something. You want to make sure that even they have as good a life as is possible for them.
Right. Especially if you're trying to set up a society in which you don't know who you're going to be, because you could be that person then. Right.
Yes.
So like you would not want to set up society in such a way that it would lead to your own suffering. That would be asinine. And so it's a really good concept to think about, and it's a necessarily nation breaking concept, because like you don't know what nation you would be born in. So actually one of the ways you would want to set up society is to not have them at that point, or no, not have nations. I'm saying.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, and I think a lot of this plays into the idea of free will, because first of all, places like America, I mean, I haven't seen any studies on this, and it's kind of frustrating. I want to know, like, how many people actually. I'm guessing that the percentage is high, the amount of people who believe in free will in America, just because of the evangelical community and how that's linked to the idea of Adam and Eve, and I mean, even Democrats, talking to Democrats, like at some point, it's apparent that they believe in free will when they start pointing fingers at people and saying, "Well, you just want to be that way for some weird reason." Um, but that's what we do with other nations. We point the finger at someone. We point the finger at a Muslim who um, wants to blow themselves up and kill a bunch of people, which I understand you have to stop. Again, there's practicality here. You can say, I want to stop that person for the betterment of society, but it's more than that, right? It's like a hatred for that person. It's like a complete. It's like if I could give that person a pill so that they did not behave like that, I wouldn't. That's how much I hate them. That's the mentality that a lot of people are in, and that is clearly linked to nationalism. It's the idea that they are in a different nation than you, and you've identified yourself as American, and they're not American. And it kind of it assists free will in these hugely unhumanitarian thoughts.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point there because, yes, like somebody may be doing something harmful and you may want to stop them, but you fully understand that if you had been born into their country at that same time, had been taught the same religion, been taught the same whole belief system, the worldview, the whole culture, you
Yeah,
would be doing what they were doing.
exactly. And if you don't, you are heavily delusional. You know, like that is delusion to a high magnitude. I was talking to a Christian friend about some of this stuff, and I think that's one of the things that stuck with him. At least I hope it is. You know, we got on morality, and I told him like it is complete bonkers to think that it's completely bonkers to think that if I had been born 500 years ago and I was an affluent white male, that I would the chances that I would not be racist, basically. Like there's a small percentage of people who obviously weren't racist, but a majority were. And for me to look back at those people and say like, essentially what you have to say, like I'm innately better than you. Like I am just innately. I don't know why, right? It's not my upbringing. I just am. I just make better choices than you because I make them. I'm not. I'm not even sure how to express their ideas without getting frustrated because they're so stupid.
Well,
Like they
yeah, I know, and yeah, racism is a fine example. Like even my grandfather on my mother's side was really racist. My mom
Mhm.
told me that. It's like I realized that yeah, had like and see the truth is, Quay, we don't know. And of course, it's just an
Yeah.
imaginary example anyway,
Mhm.
because yeah, it's highly likely that if we had been born a long time ago we might have been racist slave owners even, maybe.
Yeah.
Or he might have been somebody who naturally had more compassion and we understood that those other people were suffering and we wouldn't want to suffer if we were in their place. Some people are like that. So yeah, it's hard to know where we would fall on that spectrum, but we
Yeah.
know one thing for certain, Quaid, is that had we been raised in a different environment, something about us would be different.
Yeah, and I can take it further because I am part Hispanic. I'm part, and it's just like that fact alone, the fact that I am not fully white and I am part Hispanic, shows that right that fact alone makes it harder to be racist. It really does, you know, like the fact that I am part Hispanic, and it's not because I chose to be Hispanic. It's because I was lucky. The fact that my brother is half black, you know, like these are not things I chose to happen, but they are clearly linked to me not being racist. And so I could look back and I could blame people for this and that, but I'm being prideful. And really, what it comes down to is a matter of luck. Like I was lucky. I was fortunate. I feel fortunate. You know, like when I think about the fact that I'm not racist, um, I feel like uh, I won the lottery in some ways. Like because I don't have to hate that group of people. We live in one of the most tolerant times in history. You know, and it is for no other reason than the fact that we had thousands of years of development in which we were warring with people of different races and nations, killing them, massacring them with no remorse.
You're right. I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we live in a time where a lot of people have already begun to realize that racism is pretty stupid,
Right.
and men and women are now more equal, whereas it used to be like I don't remember when it was, but women couldn't even vote for the longest time.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, every moral kind of foothold that I have is directly linked to the fact that I was born in this. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I was born in this generation and in this time. Yeah, I mean the treatment of women. Like I would be treating I would it would be ridiculous to think that I would be treating my wife the exact same right now had I been born 200 years ago. Like that is a ridiculous notion. And you can say, well, at the end of the day, you know, it's your choice, but that's a cop out. That is a complete like that doesn't. What does that mean? What does that mean to say it's my choice anyway?
Yeah, that's the thing about it. is that to say it's your choice and to take credit or blame for it when you had absolutely no hand in any of the factors that went into that choice.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it's sort of weird because take for example, this happens on both sides. Like for example, with white and black, some people think, "Oh, aren't I great because I'm white?" And then you've got other people with their black pride thing, like, "Oh, I'm great because I'm black." And it's like, well, you know what? Each person can do that. They can take what they already happen to have been and then claim that it's a great thing to be and be proud of
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, I understand. So there's also nuances to that because like I don't want to take away. There's some black person out there who genuinely feels bad about the fact they're black. I think that that person should have pride in who they are, but not to the point where they actually think that they're better than other races because of it. That's really the problem. So people should be comfortable with who they are, obviously. But the idea that you should have this kind of as if it's not even linked to choice at all. I mean, it's race completely. Like that, you should just be proud of it because you were born into it is ridiculous. Again, I understand it as a counteraction to the racism.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you though, Quaid. Is the kind of pride that is a problem is when you're actually thinking that you are better somehow
Yeah,
than someone else. That's the key issue.
yeah, yeah. Uh, I mean, I was trying to think of a conversation that I had yesterday about this because we were talking. I mean, it's like close to Fourth of July now, so like I'm having all these Everybody's trying to drag me into these conversations about politics in America and flag burning. That's another one. Like that. That's a perfect example. Like you never see people get so upset about anything as when you flag burn, right? And it's like I understand the sentiment. I like me personally, I would never flag burn just because I don't really have a reason to, unless I was cold. And if you're freaking freezing and you don't burn a flag because of some symbol, you're really not all there in terms of your brain capacity. Um, but people get really riled up about it, and it's because of patriotism, and it's because of this idea that you have to identify with the symbol rather than the things that the symbol stands for. The ideas are better. I mean, they just are like freedom. It's like yeah, I get it, and I understand that the flag symbolizes that. But people don't get as upset when there's actual infringements on freedom. They get more upset about the symbol of freedom being burned, which is ironic, right? Because what they want, it's really funny because it's this weird dynamic where like you want to take someone's freedom to burn a flag that represents freedom.
Okay, Quaid, I gotta ask, first of all, who are these people that burn American flags?
Oh, really? They're all over the place.
I don't know, maybe I'm just like I don't get out much or something, but
Yeah.
I didn't know this was going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's people who burn flags. There's people who step on them. Here at Wright State, and by me, there was some guy who was stepping on a flag as some type of protest, and a soldier like went up, and it got really physical because of it. So yeah, I mean, people are, and then I have, like, I don't know what your Facebook consists of, but I told you I used to be a conservative Christian, so I have all these right wing conservative nuts on there. If you burn the flag, you should be hung by the neck until you pass out. Like really, for a piece of cloth that was manufactured probably in China. Like Jesus, it's really weird. It's really strange to think about living with all these people. I'm
Well,
not trying to blame them, by the way, either. That's the thing that we can talk about now, or kind of the other side of the coin is blaming people who are, overly patriotic.
well, yeah, but like I was just gonna mention, it sounds like, for example, I've heard that some Muslims get really upset if someone burns a Quran or something.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. You kidding me? I mean, so I mean, but you've heard about like Charlie Hebdo and the Danish cartoon. You've heard about that though, right?
Yeah, I something about them depicting the Prophet Muhammad in some cartoon, some terrorists killed the people in Paris that produced that. that magazine or whatever it was, or
Yeah, yeah. That was the Charlie Hebdo thing.
yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, so it's everybody getting upset over symbols, and patriotism has a lot to do with that. I mean, they had the thing in Texas where they had the Draw Muhammad Day. I don't know if you heard about that at all.
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, yeah, it was a Draw Muhammad Day, and some Muslim got upset, and like, I can't remember what happened now because it was a while ago, but he like pulled out a knife or something and tried to like stab some people. Um, but yeah, this whole idea of being obsessed with symbols, it's something that we need to think about how to counteract because it is ridiculous. And I mean, obviously, these people don't have a choice in it. They were that's that's the kind of the power of the symbol, isn't it? That like you can drive it into somebody so hard that they identify it with it so heavily that they're willing to kill even when they're wrong over it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Quaid, because it really kind of makes you examine yourself in a way, realizing, let's see, are there any symbols that I am attached to? Is there anything
Yeah.
that I would react that way if somebody attacked that symbol of something identify with?
Right, right. Yeah, I've thought about that too, and that's linked to religion in a lot of ways. Because I was thinking about this. That's something that I wanted to do if it ever happened. But like, you know how people like to say that atheists are religious too, um, which might be partially true. Maybe it seems like there are atheists out there who have dogmatic ideas. But what I would want to do is like carry around like I don't know, like a Christopher Hitchens book or maybe like a Charles Darwin book or something, and then like immediately take it out and start ripping the pages and writing slurs about the author on it, and then tell them to do the same thing because they never would, or they most likely wouldn't. Like they would not take the Bible or the Quran out and start doing it and be like, yeah, that's really the difference between what I believe is a philosophy and your religion. Like I'm not religious, you know. Like I don't have these symbols that I defend for ridiculous reasons. Like I'm allowed to criticize any idea, um, and again, not blaming them because they can't. It's again, you feel fortunate. Like I feel fortunate that I am able to criticize any idea that I want, and I feel free to do that. It's something that I didn't I gained it through education, and the reason that I decided to become educated had nothing. It was because of circumstances I had no control over. Um,
Yeah, like I wanted to mention what you said about there about how, people claim atheists are religious or like atheism is just a religion. And here's the deal. Now, while there may be some of those people out there, I think the main thing, at least the way I am, and you're probably the same way, Quaid, is that, there are certain people that we learn things from, like Christopher Hitchens or Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins or something like that. But we don't hold these people up as some unquestionable authority figure, nor do we worship them. And if they said something that we disagree with, it's like, hey, well, I disagree with this person. But we don't have any like emotional bondage to where we have to agree with that person.
yeah, yeah, and actually you can do the same thing with the founding fathers. It's a huge problem. Like with the Second Amendment. Now, I don't want to get into some big gun spiel here because I have nuanced opinions about that. But when people appeal to the Constitution as if that is the only reason you need for anything.
Yeah.
And like, no, like I think there's a lot of good things about the Constitution. The guys who made that were highly educated. I think that they were bred during the Enlightenment period, which is evident in the documents that they forged. I am not afraid to criticize them. Some of them owned slaves. Some of them had really bad ideas, and we need to be able to. I mean, what makes their ideas so great? I mean, what did they do to the Constitution? They made it ratifiable. Like, you can change it. They made it so that you can change it. But people want to, point to the Second Amendment and say, like, this is the only, reason that I need. And it's just like, we can have a discussion about your right to own guns, without appealing. Like we can have a logical and factual discussion about this thing without appealing to something that was written on a piece of parchment a long time ago.
Well, yeah, and I know what you're talking about, Quay. There are people like that who will just say, "Well, according to the Constitution, I have the right to do this, so shut up, anyone who challenges it."
Right.
That, and when they do that, they're basically saying the same as like when a Christian says, "Well, the Bible says this, so shut up, you're wrong if you say different."
Exactly.
And so I find that, yeah, I find the problem is they want an infallible, unchangeable, ancient writing to take precedence over what anyone says to the contrary. And
Yeah.
what's ironic about that is that in so doing, they always defeat themselves because I guarantee you those ancient documents will say something that that person doesn't like, and then they'll just say, "Oh, well, that was for old times, but I know better than this ancient document for this part, but I want to use this ancient document to support my position with this other thing."
Yeah, yeah. You got to pay attention to context. Context. There's a really funny video by non-stamp collector where like someone is spouting off Bible verses like, love thy neighbor, or all the really highly moral, or what we would consider today still moral and virtuous verses, and they're like, oh yeah, they're really enjoying it. And then the second you bring up a verse that is not what we consider moral today, well then, it's a matter of context. Oh, well, it's just like you never ask about the context to any of the peaceful stuff. You only ask about the context of the stuff you do not like, and that's telling,
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely, because that's just it, is that people do that. They will they want to use something to they agree with the parts they like and throw away the parts they don't like. And like it's kind of interesting because I mean we can all agree and disagree about certain things, but the problem is, in particular, this applies to religion where they say the whole thing is true and it's all the word of God, for example, meaning it's all right basically. Then they've got themselves stuck where they can't disagree with it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem with it. That's the problem with patriotism. Is like once you hold something up too high, you can't progress on it. That's what's to me. That's why I love science so much, and that's why I love the Enlightenment perspective. Is because that's what I love about the idea that there are no absolutes. Like what we've gotten into this argument, or I've gotten into this argument with a bunch of people before, religious and non, um, and there might be absolutes, but it might actually be beneficial to pretend that there are no absolutes, because the second you have an absolute, what you're saying is I can't be wrong about this thing, and that means if you do happen to be wrong about that thing, it goes uncorrected forever because it's an absolute, rather than just saying, well, even if there are absolutes, we can't really know whether there are right now, so we should act as if there are no absolutes, so that way if there's anything that we're wrong about, which history has shown us there's a ton of stuff that we end up being wrong about, we can correct it at that point. We can change and adapt it. That's one of the problems with nationalism. Once you build a nation and you tell yourself this is my land and I identify it, you can't shed yourself from it. You can't criticize it. You can't change it. You can't adapt it. It doesn't grow at that point. Highly problematic.
Yeah, because if you're stuck in a position where you can't change and you happen to be wrong about something and you can't change, that means you have to be wrong for the rest of your life. And that's kind of sad.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a matter of pride too. Like it's just like I can't. You're basically making yourself God on that one issue. Like you're not saying you're God, obviously, because you can be wrong about things, but on that one issue, you're God because you can't be wrong.
Well,
And
yeah,
that's a harmful. Like even evolution. Like I know the evidence for evolution. I've studied it pretty thoroughly at this point. I've I've read just so many books on it. I'm even at this point still willing to admit that I could be wrong. There's still a margin in which I could be wrong there. And I need that there, just in case I am wrong. And that's the way things should be.
yeah. Well, it's kind of an interesting thing because yeah, that in fact here's speaking of evolution. Here's an interesting thought. isn't being a isn't the fact that being able to adapt and evolve, isn't that exactly what's required for survival? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's just it. Is that clearly there had to be differences, some sort of changes in some organisms that allowed them to survive and reproduce in a given environment. And I think what happens is anyone who's stuck in a system of being rigid and unchangeable will be weeded out because things change and you can't go. It's not like a person can live in the 20th century with the same ideas and beliefs and attitudes that they had 500 years ago.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, that's just it. Is new times require new knowledge, and that's just it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean that's just it. Is like I think the problem with something that's unchangeable is that yeah, it can't adapt, it can't learn. And which, for example, this kind of speaks to the idea of omniscience. An omniscient being could not learn anything new.
yeah, I know. Like it's one of the kind of the criticisms of the at least that version of God. I would prefer a God that could change, because that implies growth. And
Yeah,
actually, that might be a little paradox there. A little like, can God grow?
yeah.
If
And if yeah, can God learn and grow and admit when he's wrong? Because if not, then he's not all powerful.
Yeah, and if he is, then he's not all knowing.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just
So
it. It comes to the idea that being able to change is a power, is a useful power, a useful ability to be able to change.
yeah, yeah, that's really important, and it goes back to the whole nationalism thing. Like once you build that kind of mindset in your head that you're nationally different from everybody else, you behave as someone who is that in that nation, and you can't grow because you're trying to be that person who's from that nation rather than just taking any ideas, no matter where they come from, and really growing as an individual and as a species. It's making it really hard to grow as a species. If especially if we're thinking about the future with the whole Venus project thing, um, or somebody sent me, like, I don't know if that was you or somebody else, but somebody sent me like a criticism video of that. Did somebody send it to you? Did you see that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
There was some guy that was talking about, like, he was basically criticizing people who are really into the Venus project for. I could see what he was saying. I still don't know what it is, so it's hard for me. I can't even criticize it because I don't. I'm still not. I haven't fully grasped what we're supposed to do with that concept yet. But I still think that everybody wants to move to something like that. If it's not the Venus project, it's some future where all humans are sustainable and in a better, more positive mental state, and unified. And it really, if you want something like that, you have to start to eradicate this idea, or at least prepare people mentally for the idea of giving up their nationalism and their patriotism.
Yeah, I think generally that's what we want is we want more equality. We don't want these barriers that divide us from other people because it's kind of bizarre because in a certain sense, as long as we're competing and fighting over who has the best identity, who is from the better country, who has the better skin color, who has the better religion, we'll just be fighting and there will be more wars and violence and then we all suffer.
Yeah,
So we all need to be on the same side. And of course, getting there, I don't know if it will happen or when it will happen, but that's what I want.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to be under a certain label. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Venus Project. That's just one proposal of many. But something where it's not the current system, where you have the very rich, the very poor, different things like that, where some people are treated better than others for dumb reasons.
yeah, yeah. And it's really sad too because like, kind of the to me, for something like that to happen right now, at least in a way that I can imagine, and it happening in a quick kind of manifested way, would be some type of calamity that affects us all, like an alien race trying to, like that what is it, the Independence Day or whatever, like They're all the nations are separated until aliens come to destroy us. Then we unify. And then all of a sudden we're all humans, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
And it's a really it's we should probably try to get rid of that idea because that is a an adolescent mindset because that's something they did to 10-year-old campers. They put 10-year-old camp. They made a. Have you heard about that study where they made Camp A and Camp B, and then they basically just made them identify with that concept. You are Camp A, and Camp B they're something different. They're something you don't understand. And these kids got really nasty with each other. Like they poisoned each other's water and stuff.
Oh, wow. Where did
Yeah,
this happen?
you would have to look it up. I mean, it wasn't like death poison, but yeah, they contaminated the water of the other like that's how nasty they got. And so these kids, because they identify with A, with just the symbol of A, they the other side became irredeemable enemies. Irredeemable. Like they were just innately evil. And they try to take these kids and like so what they did was they took these kids and they like tried to take them bowling together after that. So they set up the camp to study their behavior and how they behaved, and they behaved like adults do for some reason, separating us between lines and making a symbol for ourselves, and then trying to kill uh, or uh, disassociating ourselves with anybody with a different symbol. Um, and they took them like bowling, and it didn't work. Like they still continued to compete with each other and be vicious. And the only thing that worked was when they had a common enemy. Like at one point, like I think what they did was like both of their water sources got contaminated and they had to fix the issue together. Then they started to identify with each other. But that was the only way that you could get them to do it. And it's probably true for this world as well. It's probably true for grown ass adults as well. Like it would take another enemy from a different planet or something like that coming here and really making us realize that we don't actually have to fight. We could actually come together to fight something that wants to kill us all. I mean, something like global warming, except global warming is like a silent killer. So like nobody sees it coming. It's not really something people can identify with because most people don't even believe in it. But something like that we could like come together and finally break down the barriers of what it means to be a different nation. Um, but it would also take a lot of readjustment because again, like you can't allow the genital mutilation of females because of your religion. You can't allow the killing of homosexuals. You can't allow forcibly making. You can't allow killing people who don't want to subscribe to your religion. So these are things that like no matter what world we live in, people of other nations are going to have to give those up. There are things we'll have to give up too as Americans, and which is a good thing. But there are things and policies that would have to change and mindsets that would have to change in other countries for stuff like that to happen.
Yeah, see, that's just it, Quaid, is that there are certain things that I think we do have to agree on as a world. And that's the important thing is because we recently had that podcast with George. I think you and George and Jamie and I were part of that. Like, what things do we have to agree on? Like
Yeah.
it's interesting because there are some things that just are not important. It's just not all that important.
Yep.
That we all have the same favorite movie or favorite book or something, for example. But some things that affect the world as a whole, we have to be agreed upon. Climate change is one of those things. But yeah, I do find it problematic that you have, like, say, religions where you have to kill non-believers, or you have to kill gays, and you have to severely damage the genitals of females and crazy stuff like that. There are things that just have to go, like you said, and that's the key issue, is that because it seems like nobody wants to be told what to do, and yet they're telling other people not to do certain things that they can see are harmful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're stuck in kind of a paradox here where we have to basically, in order to have peace and have things work out, we have to agree on these things. And if not, then we're all just doomed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the thing with George, like I don't think we have to all agree on the God issue to live peacefully. I just think that we just have to not force it on each other. We have to be like, and not have inequalities created because of that. That's it. Like, as long as as long as I'm not infringing on his rights because he believes in God, it's a non-issue there. It's something. Hopefully we can work if we can come to some agreement on it, that's also great. But you don't need that agreement to sustain peace. And there are some agreements you have to have to sustain peace.
Yeah,
Um,
and sometimes it may be something where you have a strong disagreement with someone where I may think they're completely insane for believing something, but I'm not going to hurt or kill them for it. For one thing, I'm a pacifist.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, so at the end of the day, we're still friends and we try to get along the best we can, even though we don't agree on every little thing.
yeah, yeah. You're right. I mean, I'm I don't consider myself a pacifist personally, but with things like, so I mean we've already talked about it, but if somebody, like, so for instance, if somebody is um I think we need to think also beyond this concept, because, like, let's say a Muslim husband is he's making his wife wear has she clearly doesn't want to do that, but she's being made to. I, I do not want to live in a society where he has the right to take it, despite the fact it doesn't affect me at all. It has nothing to do with me, um, in my family. Um, it's still not a right. It's still not a right that they should have, and those are going to be the harder ones, like the ones that it doesn't really affect me at all, or it doesn't affect a large portion of the population, but because someone sees it as like a unit of their family, it's their business, rather than seeing every individual as an individual, including children, by the way. Like, that's another concept. It's like this is one of the things that's going to be hard to get rid of. Like, I personally do not believe that parents have the right to indoctrinate their children in any way they see fit. Like, and that's something that Christians will fight with you about until they die. Like, you'll have to kill them because they don't to them, their children is their property. They own their child. Their child is not someone who will eventually grow up to be what we call an independent person, which involves being allowing that person to evaluate themselves and their own lives and what they want to be through the developmental stages. So before they actually get to the point where they're considered independent, they need to be able to explore themselves and what they think, which is what you do in school. But uh, a lot of fundamentalist Christians don't want their kids going to secular schools, or don't want them. And by secular, I don't mean like we're going to force atheistic principles on them. But what I mean is we're not talking about God as if this thing is true. We're having discussions about things, and you're being introduced into a bunch of different worldviews. And then you can go home and your parents can tell you whatever the fuck they want. But it's really pivotal to have that place where you can go and talk things out and know it's okay if you disagree.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like that movie I saw recently, A Matter of Faith. Remember I wrote a review for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, what was interesting about that is that the dad was all upset that his daughter was learning evolution in that biology class.
Yeah.
And so it gets into this thing like, so it's kind of weird because you're right, Quaid. Parents, they want to be able to make their children believe the same way they do, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like they want to silence anything that may be contrary to that. But like you said, something very important is that these people view their children as property. They don't view them as some person who's going to think about what they want in their life. And just like as I don't think non-human animals can be the property of humans, for
Uh-huh.
example.
Yeah.
So in that same way, children are persons, not property. And so that's the tricky thing, is that there cannot be such a right to do certain things to other living things, because then you have to consider, well, what rights do those living things have?
Right. Right. Yeah. And I
It,
mean,
and it's a really tough balance sometimes. Sometimes I just really don't know, because on one hand, you you want to stop harmful things from happening, but at the same time, you don't want to become the person who is indoctrinating somebody and forcing your views on them. So it's kind of a tricky thing to work around, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of things. I've thought about this issue like pretty, especially the children thing. Like I've given it a lot of thought and just trying to integrate all the philosophy that I've read and everything. But I don't think that it's unfair to say your child's going to be educated. Like your child is going to learn about science. Your child is going to learn how the scientific method works. Your child is going to learn about the scientific paradigm. Your child's going to learn about what scientists think about things. Um, it, but that doesn't mean you can't have your, because to them it's just like, well, what about my worldview? What about what I believe? And it's like, I'm not trying to take that away from you. You can still believe everything. You can still share with your child what you believe, right? Like you can still have that conversation with a child. But if you're asking to have a deadlock on this child's brain, you do not want you do not want to raise a human being. You want a slave. You want somebody who bends to your worldview.
Yeah,
So
it's
that
yeah, it's very interesting how this is, Quade, because here's an interesting way of putting it, is if you talk to those parents and you ask them if they believe everything the same way their parents did they
yeah.
follow along with what their parents wanted them to be? And they may realize that they didn't. They're not the same as their parents. They're still separate.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting thing, because even though naturally, Quaid, I want everybody to believe only what is true and to all be in agreement on certain things, but I want it to, you might say that I want it to all be done because these people realize something is right and it's true, but not because their parents would spank them if they didn't believe that, or
Or
or that the government or some religious person would kill them for not believing that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's just it. Is I don't want it to be done through violence.
Or penalize them in any way, really. I mean, even past that, like even if you're not committing violence, there's still certain things you can do to make it really hard for that person to think differently, even if you're not spanking them. It's a spanking is a strong motivator. Don't get me wrong, and violence is definitely a huge issue when it comes to that. But ostracizing somebody or um, reacting very vitriolically when they think differently than you, and letting them know in so many ways that the way they think is not correct, threatening them with hell. Like to me, there's like stuff like that. Like should a parent who believes in hell be able to tell their child about hell? And that's a tough one, right? That seems like a tough one. Um, but to me, it's about the presentation. Like if you're talking about it like it's a natural repercussion of what your worldview is, that's different than if you're like, no, this is going to happen. Like if you believe it, you're going to go to hell, and to tell them that every day, at some point, it becomes brainwashing. Like at some point, you know what I mean? Like you're not just telling them about what you think and what you believe. You are forcing them through threats. That's I mean, hell is a threat. It's a very strong threat. It's to me one of the reasons that Christianity has lasted so long. But it's still a threat. And I don't think parents should be able to do that either.
Right, I get what you're saying. There are things like that that while they may not be direct physical violence, they are a type of psychological violence. You might label it as such, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like particularly the idea that people won't be your friends anymore, or your family may disown you or whatever because you no longer agree with them on something. And yeah, that's sort of another type of abuse in a way that keeps people bound to not to, for example, even though they may be different than their family or friends, they keep quiet about it and just want to be secret because they want to stay part of that group and be accepted.
yeah. And I mean, the brain is very strong. So I mean, the brain will convince you of things that clearly aren't true. Like, and it does that. Like, so it's not just a matter of like. Sometimes it is like I'll keep quiet, but it's you don't give your reasons to disbelieve that thing because you're afraid of the repercussions of it. And to you, you're not actually. It's not that I'm not giving myself reasons not to believe in Christianity, but it's all subconscious. It works on a ironically non-free will level. You know, we always want to associate consciousness with free will, which is still ridiculous, but it happens completely behind the scenes. It happens in the subconscious, this thing where like we withhold information from ourselves. We don't choose to withhold info. Obviously, everybody wants information, or at least they say they do. But for some reason, certain uh, bits of information evade people even when they've had direct contact with it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Quaid, because here's the deal. We're not consciously choosing, even in the compatible sense of choosing. We're not choosing consciously. It is happening subconsciously, and we're becoming aware of it. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around that. Even though it's true, it's kind of hard to talk about it in those terms.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I think we're getting better at it, especially with all the studies and stuff. I mean, it really is like you have to accept the fact that there is you're like the computer screen. You know, like things pop up on the computer screen that you can see, but really all the stuff that's going on is behind the scenes, and you're not deciding any of that. You know, like that's
Yeah.
it's something that's true, and um, I don't know. That's to me a better way to like think about it. Like I'm, it's not that hard for me to. There are things like so. For instance, I'll have a feeling, okay, like I'll feel angry about something or something like that, and then I'll go, why am I angry? And it only occurs to me 5 to 10 seconds later why I was actually angry. Like the thought then arises, like in full consciousness, and it's clear that the thought was behind the scenes, developing for some reason. I saw something that reminded me of someone who made me upset, and only later do I realize, oh, that's why that upset me. You know, so it's clear that to me it's not that far fetched than to expect your thoughts to really be out of your control because when you have feelings sometimes you don't know why you're having them in a lot of different ways, and then it only occurs to you after why you actually had the problem. That's
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing about it is that I don't know if this was your experience, but in my experience, it was sort of like, well, you have a certain feeling and then you feel guilty for feeling that feeling.
uh-huh.
But here's what's interesting is now I don't do that. I just think I'm having this feeling. Well, why do I feel this way? And I think about it and then I figure out, this may be the cause of why I felt angry or sad or whatever. And then once I analyze it, and because I'm not blaming myself, realizing I didn't choose the thought or the feeling, I don't have the guilt. I don't have any added on negative emotions
Uh-huh.
on top of it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's to me not a, I don't know if, I was thinking about this today. Like I don't know if I should ever feel guilty about a thought. Like to me, I don't know if like that might have pros and cons, um, but like what you do is really what matters. Like it really does.
Yeah.
Like if I have so for instance I have a thought that is what people would consider racist. You know, um, or I thought negatively about someone because of the color of their skin. Um, if I have that thought But then when it comes to the laws, when it comes to me treating that person a certain way, I treat them completely separate from that thought. And this is, I think, a problem for a lot of people is we can't separate our thoughts from reality. We really can't. Like, we think they're the same, and Christianity has a lot to do with that as well, because there's thought crimes in Christianity. You know,
Exactly.
the thought of the thought crime. And it's ridiculous. Like, it really is how you treat people that really does matter. I mean, if I had that thought to myself, by myself, but I went up and I shook that person's hand and I made sure they were well fed and I cared about their ideas, I tried to get to know them, what does that thought really matter? What does it really matter, you know?
Yeah, well, it's sort of an interesting thing because, like, take for example, I mean, this isn't even very serious or anything, but like, let's just take for example, you think that somebody's really ugly, like they're just really disgusting
Yeah.
looking, but then it has
Yeah.
no effect on how you treat them. You treat them as an equal, like everyone else. It's like, well, they may look unattractive in whatever way your subjective brain thinks they are,
Right.
but that doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, but the only thing that I could think of against that though is like if I'm having so many like so if I'm having that thought reoccurringly, like someone is ugly or someone is I'm having negative thoughts about a race because like it seems like it can only happen so many times before it does in some way translate into what happens in the real world. Like even if it's subconscious.
But it's sort of an interesting thing because what it makes you realize is that you might think somebody is ugly or stupid or whatever, but in the end, because you know it wasn't their choice to be that way, and you can't blame them, it means that in no like for me, it's never led to any sort of action against that person because to do so requires for them to deserve it, and they
Right.
don't.
Yeah, I know. That's the advantage to us as free will skeptics. I really would like some like studies closer to stuff like that because I feel the same way. Like I have thoughts which I would consider bad or which are negative towards people, but I am always vigilant and persistent in trying to make things fair for people, even no matter what. And I don't want that person to feel bad. Like this is everybody. Like I don't want anybody to experience things that they don't want to experience. Um, so I don't think it translates in the same way when a racist actually when a racist like gets themselves worked up in a fervor because they've thought so many racist thoughts that they actually go out and commit a bad action. Like whereas me, like if I have a racist thought, I really don't mean any ill will towards anybody of a different race than me. I really don't, and it's because of the free will thing. And this is anybody. I don't mean a crazy person. I don't mean a sociopathic terrorist ill will. I am willing to do certain things to ensure that they don't do anything to me or another human being. But past that, like I wish they could just have a better life, and it's because of the free will thing. It's because I recognize they like me. I am lucky and they are unlucky, and once you boil everything down to that, you end up wanting to help people more rather than hurt them.
Exactly. And see, that's the experience I've had as a determinist, basically, is that, well, realizing, well, these people didn't choose to be how they are. And if I'd had their exact circumstances up to the present moment, I would be them. Then it's like, yeah, it's weird because you cannot in any way even psychologically justify wanting to hurt them. You can't.
Yeah.
And so like the desire actually never arises for me to want to hurt someone, whereas it did years ago, under a free will belief system, if I would
Mhm.
get upset enough at someone doing something, but
Yeah.
I think one of the benefits of understanding human behavior better through all my immersion in looking at what causes human behavior, then it's gone. It's like that never happens anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I, I still think about hurting certain people or whatever. I don't think about it in the same way though. Like it's to me that's so I still think about hurting people, but it's never so that they're hurt. It's because I have to do this action in order to have what I perceived to be the greater good. Like, so if someone is lunging at somebody else with a knife who isn't trying to fight that person at all, I think about hurting the person with the knife, kicking the knife out of their hand, or whatever I have to do to stop that person from hurting the other person who isn't trying to do anything to them. But it's only for that purpose. It's not because I want that. It's like if I remove that person from that circumstance and they weren't going to hurt that other person, I would have no. The anger stops immediately, or the will to hurt that person stops.
Right. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like the entire interest is only on stopping somebody from hurting someone. It's never about hurting someone yourself. That
Right.
is just a side effect of that you're trying to stop them from doing something harmful.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like the hurt is a side effect, and I only ever want it to be a side effect, and that's also a difference. So when someone from America is looking at someone from the Middle East, that's the difference. It's like, even if you remove that terrorist from that situation where they can't commit an atrocity, they still want that person to suffer. That is sadism.
Yeah,
Like,
that's just it. And see, that's just it. As I mean, you could, a person can and here's like my thought on it is that a person could, um, they could, for example, believe that that person needs to be in prison for the rest of their life. They may even, for practical reasons, say that that person should be put to death. They may do that. I don't do that personally,
mhm.
but it's where they want that person tortured and in horrible pain for the rest of their life because they feel like they deserve it, that sadism comes in.
Exactly. For no other reason than that they want that person to suffer. That's sadism by definition. I
Right.
want that person to suffer because it makes me feel good that they suffer, rather than I want that person to suffer not because I want them to suffer, but because the suffering somehow leads to, or the suffering or the death of that person leads to something better. Like, so again, like I would, if the if the circumstances were right, I would completely kill a terrorist. Now, if that terrorist was not a threat to anybody and I could capture them, it would be no, like, it immediately becomes sadism to be like, I just want this person to die because it makes me feel good that they're dead. That is sadism.
Right, and here's the key issue about it, Quaid, is I think it takes belief in free will for it to make you feel good to hurt or kill someone.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's the tricky part of it, is it really does change your whole psychology in a way that's amazing and ironically frees you from certain bizarre negative feelings.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah, and then to go back, just to, in case somebody does actually like go through the whole hour of this episode, like, so the thing with the Christian and the child, that also applies to me. Like, if I'm doing something harmful to my child that is taking away my child's independence, somebody should stop me. Like, I'm not being unfair about this thing. Like, if there's something that I'm doing that is against what science or whatever knows to be wrong, what we know verifiably to be wrong, somebody should stop me in the same manner that I don't think religious parents have the right to do those things to their children.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, like the first thing, obviously, if possible, is it's best to reason with that person if that can be done. It may not always be possible, but that's ideally where it would start.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing. Like, when you think about that person that way, you go straight to the harsher things. Like, that's what happens. I guarantee that's what cops are thinking when they're out there, like, and they have a disdain for certain. We won't necessarily get even color involved, but let's say in a certain geographical location, these people are scum because they live here. When you think of people like that, you go straight to the extreme forms of problem solving rather than saying these people are not they're not at fault for the way that they were born and what they were raised and the way they behave, and therefore I need to. This becomes a problem solution thing, not a I need them to suffer thing.
Right. That's just it, is that it's hard for them to just see them as people and want to help them because they just have a view. Oh, well, they're bad, they must suffer.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I think yeah, it sort of plays into the whole good bad cop thing where there's the good cop and there's the bad cop and they have different approaches.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we haven't talked for a while, but I think a brief review is that, like, we started out talking about how silly, like, nationalism, trying to act like your country is better because it's your country. And we're just talking about, like, how it's just one of many things that divide us when we should all be on the same side working together.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And it plays into the whole free will belief a lot that separates us too much.
A lot of it has, yeah, a lot of it is directly linked to free will, and I'm sure patriotism is just one of those. That's it. If it's not directly, I mean, I'm sure it is directly linked to free will, but it certainly exacerbates the harm caused by free will because it just gives another reason. Free will is a reason to separate yourself from other people, and so is nationalism.
Yeah. It's almost like to the extent that we separated ourselves from each other with these bizarre labels is to make an illusion of separation because the reality is that we're really not as separate as we sometimes think we are.
Absolutely, well said.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a good place to end it. What do you think, Quaid?
I think that sounds good. Let's wrap it up.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Chandler Klebs and Quaid, and we've been talking about silly things like nationalism and racism and free will belief and all sorts of silly things that separate us when there's no need for that. So I hope it's been educational and you've learned something. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back with more episodes in the future.
Happy 4th of July, too.
Yeah. Happy 4th of July, if that's your thing.